Where are you on directories these days?
Well, it's funny you ask because I got my foot in the door of digital legal marketing at a directory. I think this is I am really fascinated in how directories have come back, and I do believe that this is going to get naval contemplation philosophical about SEO versus AI generated content and where the overlap is. The key for both of those things, in my opinion, Guy, is they are trying to evaluate the authority of the content. Now, we've heard people talk about EAT for Google, and how they use that to determine what I say is the evolution of authorship, which basically says if Guy wrote an article about law firm SEO, that is going to be pretty good because it's Guy. And if Guy writes an article about purple flowers, it's going to be pretty crappy because Guy doesn't know anything about purple flowers, right? That's the overall concept of authorship, which evolved into EAT. That evolved further. Google Business Profiles, you can now manage the social profiles that are associated with a specific Google Business Profile. And I believe that Google did that specifically to start drawing a web that identifies who wrote a piece of content very accurately. Okay. And a lot of that is built on social media, but it's also built on directories, right? And tying all of those things together to understand who wrote a piece of content. So this is a very, very long-winded way of me saying, while I think the links are the primary SEO tool to define authority, that was the one thing that made Google the better search engine than the 27 search engines that existed before Google came out. It was the link profile, and that's where they got their very, very valuable IP using links. The LLMs are different, right? And philosophically, the LLMs fundamentally have a different view into authority, right? Having said that, there's a high correlation between what happens in LLM authority, which I believe is heavily built around directories. They're not using links, but those directories in turn link out to other authoritative places, right? And so there's a high correlation between the two. And I think they are coming at authority of content authorship from two different paths that tend to have a high Venn diagram overlap. How is that for philosophical pontifications about AI and SEO? You think I'm roughly onto something?
I think so. This is how I would frame it. I think it's really important. We might have to cut this into a second. I don't know where we are time-wise, but this is an important distinction to make. For folks that are watching this on YouTube, I've shared a ChatGPT window, and the prompt is best lawyers in Detroit. And it lists, looks like on this particular result, you're getting 7 law firms. The listing that I'm looking at is the name of the law firm with an overview section. There's a small link to the law firm's Wikipedia page, which I think is interesting. Not actually the firm's website. And anyway, I'm bringing this up to give us the context for this conversation. And parsing some of what Conrad said, the LLM takes the body that it's the training data, the corpus that it's learning on, and then tries to predict based on the prompt what is the most likely response that it should make based on that prompt, based on the information it has in its training data. And the point here is that prompt, that the training data, it's not just looking at like, hey, how many links do these domains have? It's like, what does my data set show me about the most likely firms that are the best law firms in Detroit from what I know? So to Conrad's point, the actual response to the prompt is not link-based, which with the search engine, it is largely, or historically has been largely link-based. And we'll talk about this in the context of AIOs too, because we're seeing a similar thing in the AIOs. But what happens with the LLM is that first it decides, okay, this is the response, it crafts the response. And then, from my understanding, and folks that are experts on this can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is then it goes back and finds information from its corpus that are the most likely places to place citations. So it's not actually citing the information that it is delivering on the prompt response. It's actually going back and finding a citation that it believes makes sense to support what it responded to in the prompt. So that raises a couple different things, because people ask us all the time, how do I show up in these responses? Number one, I would say, get involved in the conversations. Get involved in the corpus of the training data, regardless of link or not. The LLM has to be learning, quote unquote, learning something about you and your firm in its training data, or you're never going to show up. If you're not in the training data, you're not going to show up, right? It's as simple as that. Secondly, I think there's this question of how do you get your site to show up? Now, as we said in this example, and folks following along in the video, you can see these are largely Wikipedia entries for these different firms. And then it also has this sources section. And if you look in the sources section for this particular one, it's a lot of Wikipedia.
And Superlawyer. Oh, look at that.
Right. So after you scroll down after Wikipedia, what do we see? To Conrad's point, we start to see the directories. You got Super Lawyers, Best Lawyers, Justia, Yelp, more Super Lawyers. You've actually got an actual law firm website in here. But it's overwhelmingly, after the Wikipedia entries, is overwhelming directories. For a more localized prompt, best car accident lawyers in Detroit. In the example we're looking at, interestingly, number one, it's got a map embed. So understanding how the LLM is generating the map embed, I think, is very important. In this case, it's pulling Apple Maps. And so you want to know how to show up here, you better be showing up on Apple Maps. You better be optimizing for Apple Maps. And then when you go into the sources for this one, you see law firm website, directory,
Yelp.
Directory, more generalized business directory, some specific legal directories, Yelp, and more law firm websites. And so to a certain extent, in these 5 recommendations that this made, and I'll click on the list so you can see them, these listings here are actually populating more of like a traditional, almost like local pack type of result with links to the actual firm website. And so if you hold that what I said is true, it came up with this list of 5 firms and then went back and sourced the information for those 5 firms. To me, this has still got a traditional SEO type component to it, although maybe not in the classical page rank, authority site context.
So before you run out
gazing
and go spam the crap out of Wikipedia, I think you need to think about this much more holistically. What are the things that you can do that are going to demonstrate your authority and your business's authority? And directories are a big component of that. I think, and I think implicit in what I'm saying here is the sources that are being cited that Guy just showed right now, this changes all the time. It changes all the time.
I also want to demonstrate where we are in terms of sophistication.
Yeah, okay, go.
So Seva is a law firm in Detroit. But guess what? Vegan and vegetarian restaurant with a link to the vegan and vegetarian restaurant. And so this is an example of exactly what I'm talking about. It found Seva as a response. It was a very likely response to best car accident lawyers in Detroit.
Yeah.
But when it went back to get the citation information, it screwed up and it pulled Seva, the vegan and vegetarian restaurant. And so what's the takeaway here? It's not. It's got a lot of learning to do, I guess.
It's so bad. I did this morning. I did a query on how big was a 100 by 100 square, 100 by 100 foot square in acreage. I did this morning, and literally, AI came back to me and said this is approximately 0.23, which is roughly 1/17 of an acre. It's
and so what are the takeaways here?
To go.
We still have a ways to go. And again, you asked me my personal opinion. I think this stuff is going to learn and sort this stuff out eventually. It's also going to, the other thing that I'll acknowledge here is that my sense is that the training data was returning these Seva restaurant had a lot more citation data. And so that match made more sense to it than the law firm might have had. And so you can see that data scarcity and information gaps, that is the thing that you want to try to correct. So just to kind of give a contextual takeaway here, if you have a firm name that matches another business or another similar business that's not your business, that's the type of thing that you do want to make sure that you've got your information across these directories, across as many different sites as you can, because that's going to tip the scales in favor of the LLM saying, hey, I think it's most likely that they're talking about this firm and not this restaurant.
Money makes a it makes a world go round. Money makes a world go round. Yeah, money make a world go round. Money makes a world go round. Yeah, money make a world go round. Money makes a world go round. Yeah, money make a world go round.